Hey guys, I'm going to show you how to match plaids and stripes today. So I've got fabric swatches here. I have my exacto knife, parchment paper, and a sloper. I also have a pencil in case I want to trace or mark any notches. You don't necessarily need to use an exacto knife when you cut the parchment paper. I just want to be a little bit more precise and quicker. So the beauty of using the parchment paper instead of regular pattern paper is that you can place your fabric right underneath and you can see all of your patterns through. So when you cut one side of the pattern, you'll see the fabric, then you flip the pattern and you're sure to line up all of your like lines and whatever design. You can also do this for like printed fabric that might have like a floral or something, but just bear in mind that not all stripes or patterned fabric have perfect repeats or mirrored repeats. So if you're planning to do something that looks symmetrical, like a symmetrical garment, you're going to have to be sure that the pattern or the stripe repeats the correct way to go with what your design will be. So this is my center front pattern for a strapless bodice sloper that goes past the waistline. So you can either trace it with a pattern, or again, you can use your tracing wheel if you're just using like paper patterns. I would definitely recommend putting a weight down if you're using paper patterns to transfer onto parchment paper. But since this oak tag is a little bit thicker, I don't necessarily need to use weights. You're definitely going to want to mark your notches. Don't forget that. The notches are where you would align one pattern to the next. This is my grain line. If I were cutting this instead of on the fold at center front, and I wanted to cut it as two pieces to have like a center front seam, then I would just shift this over and add a little bit more seam allowance down center front. But in this case, I'm not, so I only need one pattern piece. So now I have my center front pattern traced. I can go back in with my see-through ruler just to clean up any of these lines. The waistline is obviously very important, but because I marked my notches on the outside line, I want to be sure they're inside the pattern, because once I cut that, I'm going to lose everything that's on the exterior. I'll just do like a quickie. This is a very standard pattern marking symbol for cut on center front fold. You can use your exacto knife if you like. Again, you need to have the right tools to use. Even if you're just using an exacto knife, you should have like a proper rotary mat, because these are self-healing. And when you use cutting tools on it, it's not going to damage the mat. So you can cut on it again and again. A long story short, practice first. I might be losing like 1/8 of an inch on this, but this is just for the demo. Take your time. Now I have my parchment paper see-through pattern, which is the same as this guy. I'll be able to see my stripes or my plaid perfectly through that. Let's start with cutting one of these pattern pieces in fabric. This is item number 329088, and it is a red, white, and blue plaid twill cotton shirting. Doesn't have much stretch at all, really. If you were to use the bias, you could get stretch out of it. That's kind of like a really fun tip with using woven fabrics. If you're making something that's a little bit more fitted, if it has a pattern or not, you can always cut pattern pieces on bias, which is if you were to cut on a diagonal. So if you were to place your pattern pieces in this direction rather than straight grain, you would get a little bit of stretch in either direction, which is kind of awesome. So say we were cutting on bias. If you want to be like super particular, you can even take colored markers that match your pattern fabric, and you can even draw in the pattern so that when you use this again, and if you were using it for production, they could just line it up with this. But another tip for anyone who's designing with the intention of doing production stuff, you can actually make a photocopy of the fabric, place it on your pattern, and that would be the direction that you would have the factory cut the pattern pieces. Since this pattern piece is cut on center front, I'm going to show you how you would cut the plaid on center front to match continuously. Whenever you're cutting any fabric, really, you'd be matching the selvage to the selvage. The selvage edge is just this raw edge going lengthwise. So if you were purchasing fabric by yardage, you would just continuously have like, 1 yard of selvage, 2 yard of selvage, 3 yard of selvage on either side. Since I'm gonna cut this pattern piece on center front, we're not cutting it on the fold with a plaid or a stripe. And this would be the same for if you were cutting, say like this is the side front. So my center front pattern, center front, side front, side front. But this would be considered the side front pattern piece. So pattern 1, pattern 2. These two are gonna align. So I have a notch here and here. It's very, very, very difficult to align curved seams with stripes or plaids. So maybe in this case, if I were making a garment, I would either have to do like a basting and kind of gather this to make my best efforts to match this to this piece, or I could use my waistline here to match up along one of these stripes, and then I would take the waist of my next pattern piece and align the waistline at the bottom of the same stripe. So it's not going to align perfectly along how these curves match up, but you will get a continuous stripe where these notches match. So now that you have your pattern traced onto parchment paper and you have your plaid fabric, I'm going to match up. I am not very good with the rotary cutter, but I'm going to try my best. Because we're cutting this with no center front seam, I'm only going to cut along the top edge, the seam, and the bottom, the hem. So I'm going to use my scissor as a weight. We'll see how well that goes. And this beautiful Tula Pink rotary cutter, which is item number 322163. It has a 45mm blade. This is also an ambidextrous tool, so it's lefty or righty. If you don't have one of these bad boys, you can pin. You're just gonna have to be very, very, very conscientious of your pattern not shifting, because when you're pinning, again, that's gonna create like, a little bit of tension between the pattern and the fabric, and you want your fabric not to move because stripes and plaids have a mind of their own. So I'm gonna cut along the bottom edge. You can always use a ruler to align where you have straight edges to cut. I am gonna notch at my center front about 1/8 into the fabric. Cut this bottom bit away because that's my center front. That's really important. You can always do like a baste down center front by hand. I'm just gonna walk the rotary cutter really slow and as close as possible to my seam. This is not Project Runway, so you do not have to run through these challenges. Now I have to cut across the top edge. I'm going to use my ruler again. Don't forget your notches. I think a really beautiful idea when using plaids and stripes is maybe doing like each of your panels in a different direction. I'm going to notch my center front up here a little. For peace of mind, I am going to draw where these stripes end up. There are two options for the next step. I did not cut my notch, so let me put those in. And these are my notches for matching up to the next pattern piece. So step one, what we did was we transferred our patterns to parchment paper. Then we were sure to keep our grain line and any notches that were on the original pattern piece. Then I found a stripe on my plaid fabric that I wanted to keep centered. So I had to keep my pattern piece centered on the center of that stripe. So when it opens up into one piece, that is dead center. Okay, so you can see along the waist here how I have my center front, and then as I come out from my center front, so imagine my pencil is the point is center front, then we step out, you know, like an inch on either side, and then we hit the maroon, inch on either side, hit the maroon, and so forth. Okay, so just, it really is all about like being extra meticulous with your measurements. Don't forget to notch. There's your example of how to cut your pattern piece along center front to make the stripe as symmetrical as possible. This pattern does not have a perfect repeat. As you can see, my center line is this solid dark blue, but as we get out to our seams, I've got a red here and a baby blue, which I'm not upset about because it will blend and kind of camouflage as I add all of my other pieces. But bear that in mind when you buy your fabric, where you want the stripes to land. I think another really pretty thing to do with stripes, especially when matching them on curb seams, is you could do piping in the seams. Next, we have a stripe. So this amazing like Beetlejuice looking stripe is item number 306380, and it is a black and white striped cotton dobby. It doesn't have stretch in either direction so much. If you were to cut this on the bias, you would get a little bit of stretch in either direction. So I'm going to show you how to use a different pattern piece now. I have my center back. This is my fourth panel of my strapless bodice slopers. So when I have center back, you know, you have to keep in mind that when you're cutting stripes, you want the stripes to flow continuous from one piece to the other. So instead of cutting with the selvage as my center back, because I want the stripes to go horizontally, I'm going to rotate the fabric. And since it's a woven, there's no stretch in either direction, so you can do that. I would definitely suggest fusing your fabric before you cut your pattern pieces so that they're completely stabilized. So I've traced it onto parchment paper, and I'm going to rotate my fabric so that I have my stripes going horizontally. This piece is to be cut on straight grain, okay? So this is the top and the bottom. As you can see, it kind of curves up toward the top because the bust, this goes around the circumference of the bust, and the waist becomes a little bit more nipped. It's my waist seam, so that's going to be my guide. I'm going to lay that on the stripe. For you, this version that's pinned rather than using weights. So you want to pin within your seam allowance, because if you put pins along the center of your pattern, you might damage the fabric and it'll show on your final product. So now I have my pattern pinned down. I'm going to use my fabric scissors rather than the rotary cutter, just to show you guys another option. You don't want to cut your pattern paper, you just want to cut as close as possible there. So now I have one side. Keep in mind that my fabric, the right side is facing up, and typically you would cut your fabric with right sides of the fabric facing together. So for example, my right sides would be facing together, and then you would put your pattern piece on top. Because this stripe is very, very uniform, you can probably get away with cutting two pieces at once. It's a little risky, but because you can see where one stripe continues into the next on the opposite side of the fabric, I think it's a risk worth taking. It'll save you a little bit of time. You can baste around the perimeter of where you're going to place your pattern if you like, or you could just place your pattern right on top depending on how confident you are. So we've got the one side cut. I didn't cut my notches only because this is just an example, so don't forget your notches. And instead of using the pattern this time, I'm just going to make sure that I'm in the same direction. My selvage was on top before. Because we're cutting the opposite side, this is my center back. So my center back is here. I'm going to just flip this so I can cut the mirrored opposite side. And that's pretty straightforward. You would just pin along the edges, or again, you could use a weight. And then you have your two center back pattern pieces. I'm definitely going to keep all my scraps of fabric. I can make masks out of them or a contrasting pocket for another garment. You never know what you can use it for. I think that's the best part about buying good quality stuff is you don't want to get rid of it. Because this is my center back, I'm going to pin in the opposite direction, keep some pins in the other direction. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to baste down center back. So when I open it up, you're going to see that my stripes are going to align pretty perfectly. So I am using this amazing salmon thread. The color is 365, and this is item number 100649. Along the bottom of the spool here, you can rotate this, and that's where you can keep your loose thread end. And then after you've wrapped it and you want to unwrap it, you can just turn that in the opposite direction and the thread just like pops off. Basting, when you're doing this by hand, it's with the intention of pulling it out later, so it's very semi-permanent. I'm just gonna do like a running stitch, no knot. Now that I've basted down center back, which would be where a zipper would go, but to show you guys how when you cut with precision with stripes, your center back should be continuous stripes. If I had pressed this open, I'm sure it would look a lot more aligned, but that's a pretty incredible line up there. You could always cut your center back on the fold, similar to how we did the plaid, and then you could put the zipper down like one of the side seams and really camouflage that so you don't have like a zipper. Because honestly, sewing a zipper into stripes is like probably one of the most challenging things to do, but all I did was baste that, then I aligned my stripes. So now that you know how to cut a stripe and align that and a plaid, you are ready for anything. Good luck cutting and sewing your plaids and stripes.